producing. I thought that was kind of an interesting thought as we begin our reflections today on our reading that we just shared from 1 Peter 4 and again and 5. So again, you're welcome to kind of refer back to your bulletins if you'd like. What does your life produce? And again, I want to make sure that I am very clear that we're not talking about how much you get done every day. How productive are you? Maybe I'm the only one, but I'm guessing I'm not. That every once in a while, that actually more often than I would like to be, I get into bed and then I review my day and I think, okay, what did I get done today? And then I think of all the things that on my little checklist that I could check off or that I crossed off on my calendar. And then I go, all right, well, I didn't get as much done as I wanted to, but at least I got these things done. And then I have to stop and chastise myself, right? That's not the quality of the day, is by just looking to see how many things you got done off of your to-do list, right? That's not what life is about. It's about the time that we spent, the quality of the time that we spent with our loved ones and with doing things for other people, right? So we need to be careful about that. But one way that we can actually live a more, I don't want to say necessarily productive life, but certainly a more godly life is to be thinking a little bit about discipline. And that's what kind of jumped out to me when I was reading this scripture several months ago, kind of praying about what I would be preaching on this morning. Discipline yourselves, keep alert. And so I thought about that whole idea of discipline. We really don't talk about that very much, right? So, and partially because who likes to be disciplined, right? Nobody. I was thinking about that last night. We got out the puppy book. Walter is 4 months now. And got out the puppy book and noticed all these things that we were supposed to have done before 4 months, right? And that you're not supposed to, say something like if they have an accident in the house, you're supposed to just pick them up and put them where outside and then praise, right? Which we do all the time. But I always go, oh, Walter, right? If he makes a mess. And they talk about that. That doesn't help any, right? When you're like, oh, I hurt my throat when I did that. When you're chastising somebody or making them feel bad or guilty or shameful, that actually works the opposite. And it's, I'm sure, the same way with people. I just didn't realize it was the same with puppies. So nobody likes to be disciplined, right? But yet, if we discipline ourselves, that's something different, right? It's one thing if we say to ourselves, oh, okay, I want to go walking every day. I've got to get more steps. And then someone else comes up and says, you have got to get more steps. You've got to get out there, right? What are we going to do? Probably go, no, I'm going to sit and watch TV. Thank you, right? So the discipline that works the best is the one that comes to ourselves. Now, again, we got to be careful that we're not putting any other kind of guilt or shame or other people's expectations. There's lots of different things that we need to be careful of. But I'm kind of focusing on the idea today of disciplining ourselves to live what we would consider and what I think we would probably all consider certain criteria that would be a godly life. Now, again, I'm not going to go through that because that's something that you can be kind of working on and probably already have been, right? Of the things that you feel like you should be doing in a positive way, not just because you feel guilty, but that this is something that, this would make me, my life more enriched and more importantly, other people's lives enriched. Well, I'm not sure why I'm starting with this, but I am, I was sent to the principals one time in my life. One time. And I was in 3rd grade, and I'll say the man's name because I'm assuming he's long dead by now, but maybe not. Mr. Tincher was a brand new principal at Bruner Elementary. And again, this is my 3rd grade recollection, so I'm sure it probably is not accurate. So Mr. Tincher was most likely the most wonderful principal ever to, have lived, or at least a great principal. So nothing against Mr. Tincher. But my perspective, right, as a young person, I don't know what we did. The school did something wrong. The kids did something wrong. And so we had to march the halls. And I do mean march. So we marched the halls, right? It seemed like really, really long. It was probably like 10 minutes, right? But it seemed like all afternoon. And then we had to stand in complete silence for I don't know how long. Again, probably not long. And then he would go in like the restrooms, I guess, to make sure there was no talking in there. And then, he'd come out Well, I had a really unfortunate habit, which I'm only discovering now I still have this habit, of talking aloud to myself as I am doing things. So I kind of narrate my actions as I go. Okay, so if once I pick this piece of paper up, then I'll be able to go. I mean, I like say those things out loud, even though in my head I'm thinking them. I say them, well, so I was saying to myself, so I need to be quiet so I don't get in trouble. And Mr. Tincher came out and saw me talking and sent me to the office. I still remember that, like it was such a huge, big thing for me, right? Isn't it funny, you know, those feelings when we are feeling like we're disciplined, right? When someone else, and especially if we think we're innocent, although I was talking, not to other people, but I was talking out loud, right? And what we can learn for that. So Katie's home from college. Did you text Katie to make sure she was on her way to pick up Ben, Mark? Sorry. Okay, can you real quick? Yeah, that'd be great. Ben gets off work from the zoo at 11, so that's why she wasn't able to be here. And I'm assuming that she's very responsible, but, you know, mothers worry. Anyway, and so she's home from college, thankfully helping us pick up Ben when he works on Sundays, too. And she made that comment to me the other day. Mom, do you realize that you narrate everything that you do aloud? She said it's kind of, you know, alarming enough that you narrate everything in your head that you're doing, but then you kind of like say it out loud. I mean, that's, you know, whatever. I just was curious if you were aware. And it was very interesting. And I said, you know, you would have thought that I would have learned that in third grade. That probably was not a good thing. And probably crazy irritating to everybody else around me. Mark's never said anything about it, you know, bless his heart. So sometimes, again, if we're the ones that kind of see the value in something, it changes. It suddenly makes it something that, you know what, maybe this is something that I need to kind of work on in my own life. Discipline puts into daily practice our commitment to live a godly life. And again, that's going to look differently from everybody's interpretation of what a godly life is. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you what that is, because I don't know either. I have some very strong preferences and feelings of certain things, absolutely. But that's something that each and every one of us needs to read our scriptures, pray about, and see what, you know, kind of what we come up with, if you will. In Romans 12:2, Paul says to us, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. By the renewing of our minds. So right there is something that I would say would be something would make us godly, right? To not just come entrenched, well, this is how we've always done it. This is the right way, that's the wrong way, right? Renewing of our minds. This inner transformation takes place as we memorize or meditate on the truths of the Bible. And think about it, we have spent a lifetime developing patterns of, let's be honest, pretty sinful or selfish attitudes. Maybe thinking and behaviors. So these habits aren't broken and replaced with good behavior, whatever that would be, without commitment, right? Of what it is that we feel is important to live our lives. You know, I had two funerals this week. And one funeral is usually enough to make me think it, but two in this, you know, within 2 days really makes you think it, right? Of how am I living my life? How do I want to be remembered, right? When there's all these pictures of me all around and people are talking and sharing memories of me, how is it that I want to be remembered? And again, I'm not doing things just so that people will say nice things at a, memorial service. But you could see, again, from some of the different, all the different funerals that you've probably been to, too, you can see these patterns that come out in people's lives. And very often, sometimes we don't really even think about those patterns until maybe it's too late. So discipline is the determined effort on our part that corrects and molds and perfects the character of a person. And again, that's something that happens over a lifetime, right? It's decision after decision after decision. Small decisions, large decisions, every single day as we live our lives. What kind of person am I going to be today, right? Am I going to be somebody full of hope and positivity? Am I going to be doing things for other people first, right? And these new attitudes, again, that we kind of remind ourselves, take a period of time to go through. But thankfully, every morning, right, we can start fresh. Oh, Lord, I messed up yesterday. I did this, and this. Okay, Let's start again. And we know that we are, our slate is wiped clean. Just as physical exercise is good for the body, the Apostle Paul tells us that our minds and our emotions and our will and our spiritual life all needs vigorous exercise. We think of the Greek athletes, right? From the early triathlons and the early Olympics, that they needed to exercise their bodies, but exercise their minds, right? Think of Olympians today, that they have to go through and see, okay, here's what I'm going to do in these tough situations. I'm not going to lash, and this is not Olympian necessarily, but, we can use that same, extrapolate that same practice, right? Okay, so when my mother-in-law says this again to me, I'm not going to lash out, but I'm going to go, okay, thank you for reminding me, right? We can play that ahead of what is a loving way that I can respond to some of the situations in my life. Here's the rub, though. The tough thing about learning self-discipline is that we need self-discipline in order to learn it, right? The tough thing about learning self-discipline is that we need self-discipline in order to learn it. And again, if we think about the whole idea of integrity, we could have a really long discussion probably right now about integrity. Is there, are we a complete lack of integrity in our society today? No. Or do we see pockets of integrity? What is integrity? Is this particular action showing integrity or not, right? We would have probably some things we would all agree on and other things not so much. But there's an old saying that kind of sums it up. Sow an act, S-O-W, right? Sow an act, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. I love that. But we think about integrity's benefits. Character, a clear conscience, deep intimacy with God. Those are all things, right, that we all probably, I'm guessing, strive for, to have that integrity. Paul's instructions are in 1 Timothy 4:7-8. Says this, he says, train yourself for godliness. For while bodily training is of some value, godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. So discipline. Is there something that you really would love to be working on? That you think really would be helpful? Now, yes, maybe it's something helpful for your health. I really want to stop having so much sodium. Absolutely, yes. Have some discipline on that and work on that, right? But there's so many other things in our lives that each and every one of us more than likely have been thinking about. Oh, yeah, I really need to do that. For me, it's getting up earlier. So when Ben was at Penna and Katie was at Notre Dame, I would get up early and drive them into school. So we would always get up at 5:36 in the morning. Well, since Ben graduated and then COVID, right? And then Ben not working until later, and I have to take him. And again, thankfully, I don't have real early hours here that I have to be here at 7 a.m. So I've gotten to a not great habit of sleeping in till probably 8:30, and then staying up till, as you guys will get emails from me at 2 in the morning, right? Routinely, right? Well, now I get up at 5 in the morning, but we need to leave the house at 6:15 to take Ben to work. And so it's been a real adjustment for me and for Ben to get up every single morning. Mark's like, what do you mean? I get up at 4. He's done that for 20 years. But we're not used to it. So it's just trying to rearrange everything else. We got to get to bed earlier. We have to do this and that so that I can get up. And finally, it's been like 3 weeks. Finally, I am able to, like this morning, he got up. Mark took him in at first and then came back home and then picked me up. And then we came here. But I was able to function, at 6 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning. And that was huge for me. But it takes time, right? So each and every one of us have different things like that either we're dealing with or we know that we really should be having to, dealing with it. Self-discipline also comes in the idea of our thoughts. God didn't create us to be lazy. He created us for obedience and for commitment, I think. And again, 2 Timothy 1:7 says God has given us a spirit of discipline. But disciplining ourselves for godliness, again, begins in the mind of wanting to do that, right? Seeing the need to make a change in our lives, whatever that change would be for each of us. Self-discipline begins with the mastery of your thoughts. If you don't control what you think, this is a quote that I found, I didn't see who said it. If you don't control what you think, you can't control what you do. I like that. If you don't control what you think, you can't control what you do. Simply, self-discipline enables you to think first and act afterwards. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm still thinking about that, if that applies to every situation. But I thought it was very interesting. Galatians 5:22-23 says, the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. So in other words, if you can't control self, self will control you. Does that make sense? So again, our goal is to be like Jesus. And so discipline is helping us to achieve that spirit, that Christ-like spirit, in spirit and mind and heart and in character. And think about it, Jesus was disciplined, right? His whole purpose on earth was to live and die for you and I. And then in the meantime, show us how to live. And he had laser focus on that, didn't allow himself to be distracted. Jesus said in Luke 9:23, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross daily, and follow me. We often can't control much, though, about our circumstances, right? Sometimes, maybe not often, but sometimes. Sometimes we can't control much about the people in our lives. But we can control ourselves, right? Our reactions to the circumstances and to the people in our lives. We can control whether we want to engage in a more disciplined life. Again, however that looks in your life, however it is that maybe some things you're spot on and other things you go, I know I'm not where I need to be, right? True holiness begins and ends with living for the glory of God, whereas selfishness begins and ends with living for the glory of self. So I encourage you today to think about this for your life and pray about it, right? Ask for the Spirit's help to kind of figure it all out. Because the results will be a life transformed into Christ-likeness, which I think certainly will translate into a spirit that is joyful and peaceful. This earthly life is a mere breath in time. The older that we get, the more we see that, right? But godliness goes with us into heaven and leads us to the eternal rewards of a life lived fully with Christ. And then as we do that, we don't just do it for ourselves, but to leave a legacy ourselves for those whose lives we can impact. That's what we're called to do, I believe. May it be so. Amen.